The suitcase was by the door. Not tossed or dropped, placed. The handle aligned with the wall. The zipper sealed tight. My name tag, the one with faded pink stitching, was turned outward, like it had been arranged for a hotel pickup. I was still holding the teacup when Joel walked in. The porcelain was too hot, but I kept it in my hands. It gave me something to hold. His fiancée, Marla, followed close behind, with 2 cups of coffee, one hand wrapped in her cream-colored shawl, the other steady on the tray. "Morning," Joel said softly. Marla placed the tray on the table, then looked me over, eyes pausing on the slippers I hadn't changed in 2 days. "We've arranged transportation," she said brightly. "It's a beautiful facility. Quiet. Private. You'll be more comfortable there." I looked past them to the hallway. My coat was folded over the banister. My umbrella was gone. Joel stepped closer and offered a folder. Inside, a printed packet, pages stamped with St. Croix Medical Center's letterhead, followed by a final page titled Property Transfer Confirmation. I saw my own signature in blue ink dated 2 weeks ago. "You signed the deed over before the surgery," Joel said. "It's our home now. You need to recover in a place that's safer with care. This place has stairs." "I'm already here," I murmured. "But you shouldn't have to do laundry anymore," Marla chimed in, taking a slow sip of her coffee. "The neighbors were asking if you needed help. It's becoming a spectacle." Joel glanced at her, then back at me. "We just want what's best for you, Mom." I placed the teacup down. It clinked louder than I meant it to. "I didn't know that signature was for the house," I said. "It was all in the documents," Joel replied, not meeting my eyes. We went through everything together. He had held my hand in the hospital hallway. Said the signature was for power of attorney, just in case. That's what I remembered. I remembered how cold the tiles felt under the wheelchair wheels, how pale he looked when he said, "I don't want anything but your health." The car outside honked once. Marla checked her watch. Joel picked up the suitcase and set it beside my feet. "You'll have your own room," he said. Voice calm. 3 meals a day. "We paid for 2 months in advance." "Is this about the guests?" I asked. "The Christmas brunch," Marla gave a short laugh. "It's not just that. It's the whole impression. Joel's been working so hard, and when people come in and see mismatched plates and plastic flowers, it just doesn't reflect the home we're trying to build." I nodded slowly. My hand rested over the scar on my left side, still swollen beneath the fabric of my blouse. "I gave you my kidney," I whispered. Joel looked down. "And we're thankful. That's why we want you somewhere peaceful." Marla adjusted her scarf and opened the front door. I picked up the suitcase myself. My hand shook. Joel reached out to take it, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said. Outside the driveway was wet from morning frost. A white shuttle van idled by the curb hazard lights, blinking. I walked out without looking back. The scar ached with each step. 2 weeks earlier, Joel sat at my kitchen table with both hands curled around a mug of lukewarm tea. His shoulders trembled. He hadn't touched the blueberry muffins I'd baked that morning, not that he ever did. Marla stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes down. "My kidneys," Joel whispered. "Stage 4. It's moving fast." The word failure didn't land right away. He reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. I remember his wedding ring glinting under the overhead light. "They said I need a transplant. I'm on the list, but it could take years. If I have a living donor..." I'd already nodded. The moment he said, "if I had already decided." Just one thing, he continued, pulling a slim folder from his backpack. "The hospital needs me to be the primary contact for your care team. It's easier if the deed is joint titled. Simplifies everything if something goes wrong." He didn't look at me when he said that last part, just slid the papers forward. Marla produced a pen from her purse like it had been waiting. I signed. My name in blue ink. Joel's right beside it. Now I sat in the back row of a white shuttle van while the streets of Rochester slid past the frosted windows. My drawstring bag rested on my knees. Inside my medical file, a bottle of prescription painkillers and 2 changes of clothes. Marla had labeled the bag with tape Thali A, slanted and peeling. The driver didn't speak. We pulled up to a gray brick building with a wooden sign, Haven Grace Shelter. A woman with cropped silver hair met me at the curb. She wore orthopedic shoes and a name badge that read, Iris Henson, RN, retired. She held the door open as I stepped inside. Warm air. The smell of lentils and lemon cleaner. Bulletin boards filled with paper stars schedules and group rosters. She guided me down a narrow hall. You'll be in room C, Iris said, gesturing toward a doorway with a heavy blue curtain instead of a door. 4 cots, 1 window. No snoring finds yet. My bed was the one near the corner. A folded quilt weighted on top, patchworked in dull greens and browns. I sat down slowly, my side still sore from the incision. Later that night, I lay curled toward the wall. A thin line of moonlight slipped through the blinds, painting the floor in silver stripes. From inside my bag, I pulled out the envelope Joel had mailed the week before the surgery. Inside a clean, reprinted title. His name stood alone now. Mine was gone. I held the paper under the light until my eyes burned. Then I folded it back, pressed it flat, and slid it beneath my pillow. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere down Silver Lake Road. Inside, I didn't sleep. It was the second morning after surgery when I first noticed the pause. I had just woken up. The pain hadn't flared yet. It was hovering dull and heavy, like a sack of wet flour pressed to my side. Nurse Valerie had come in to check the monitor. Her hands moved smoothly, practiced. I asked how Joel was doing. She adjusted my IV line without answering. I tried again, softer. Is my son recovering all right? She nodded too quickly. He's fine, resting well, but she didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes were on the machine, the window, the floor, anywhere but mine. I didn't think about it then. The drugs made everything feel hazy, like I was underwater and all the colors were slow. But now, weeks later, lying on a cot in a shelter room, lit by a single fluorescent bulb, I couldn't stop replaying it. The hesitation. At Haven Grace days folded over each other. I helped in the kitchen 3 mornings a week, scrubbing pots in water, so hot it numbed the ache in my side. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I sat in the reading room with 2 Somali women, Saida and Hebo, teaching ESL. We practiced full sentences. Where is the library? The library is near the bus stop. We laughed when I accidentally said lobster instead of library, and Saida mimed claws at me. Iris kept things moving with a quiet efficiency that reminded me of the way librarians used to shelve books, fast but precise. She gave me space, but one night after dinner she came to my bunk holding a letter-sized envelope. Someone from St. Croix called, said you should have this. The envelope was pale blue. My name handwritten on the front. I opened it sitting on the end of the cot. Inside a printed letter on hospital stationery requesting a meeting with Dr. Yvonne Finch, head of transplant ethics. 2 days later, I was back in the hospital, not in a gown this time, but seated in a small consultation room with a box of tissues on the table and a pitcher of water no one touched. Dr. Finch entered with a tablet under her arm and a face that didn't waste time. Mrs. Mercer? She began. I'll be blunt. Your son was never diagnosed through any legitimate process at St. Croix. I gripped the arms of the chair. What do you mean he forged intake records? The scans in your file were recycled from another patient. Your kidney was not given to your son. It was allocated to a young man already on the transplant list. He had no idea. My voice barely left my throat. Then, where is Joel's record? There isn't one, she replied. We believe your son sold the surgery slot and forged documentation to secure the transfer. I felt the cold work its way up my spine. My hand drifted to my side to the scar that stretched under my ribs like a seal on a letter I'd never meant to send. Outside, a helicopter whirred above the hospital. The sound faded fast. Inside, I didn't move. I didn't call Joel. I didn't write. I let the silence harden the way ice forms when you stop stirring the water. At Haven Grace, Iris adjusted my schedule without ceremony. 2 afternoons a week tutoring GED students, earned a small stipend, $100 every Friday, handed to me in an envelope with my name printed neatly on the front. It wasn't much, but it covered the $95 for my blood pressure medication and left a little for necessities. I logged the numbers in a notebook, the same one I used to keep library inventories. Order steadied me. I bought a thermos from the discount aisle for $10. Matte gray, dented near the lid. Every evening, I filled it with soup from the shelter kitchen and carried it to the common room. The microwave hummed. The clock above the bulletin board ticked too loud. I ate slowly, listening to the building settle, feeling the ache along my side ease as the heat spread. Carmen noticed the way I pressed my palm to my ribs when I stood. She didn't ask questions. One night, she set a hot water bottle on my cot, the rubber still warm from the tap. For the nights that don't let go, she murmured, tucking the cap tight. During kitchen duty, the talk stayed light. Who burned the rice? Who forgot the salt? But one afternoon, a volunteer mentioned a story she'd read while waiting for the bus. A young man in the neighborhood, 27, back at work after a transplant that doctors hadn't expected to happen so fast. Private donor, she said, scraping a pot. Expedited. Lucky break. The word expedited caught. It sat wrong, like a plate stacked where it didn't belong. I went to the public library the next morning, the old habit guiding my feet. The paper crackled under my hands as I unfolded it. There it was, a small column on the Metro page. Miles Gutierrez, local trades apprentice, returns home after life-saving kidney transplant. The photo showed a thin smile, a baseball cap pulled low. The caption mentioned an anonymous donor and an accelerated match. I folded the paper along the crease and slid it into my bag, the edge sharp against my fingers. That night, I rinsed my bowl, sealed the thermos, and sat back on my cot with the hot water bottle warming my side. The building exhaled around me. In the quiet, a new shape formed, tentative, careful, but solid enough to hold. The morning light poured in through the stained glass above the shelter's front door, scattering red and gold across the linoleum. I was folding donated cardigans in the sorting room when Carmen knocked twice and handed me her phone. "You should see this," she said, voice low. The screen showed a real estate blog, Rochester Refined, glossy, curated, designed for scrolling. The headline read, "Young couple flips their first property, modern charm, with a personal touch." I didn't need to read the names. I recognized the front porch. Joel's porch, mine once. The article gushed about the open concept kitchen and upscale transformation, showing wide shots of the living room where my reading chair used to be. In its place sat a velvet sectional in a shade of oyster gray that looked like it had never touched a real afternoon. The wall where my late husband hung his antique barometer was now lined with floating shelves. Neutral art. Dried eucalyptus. The fireplace had been stripped of the stone mantle Joel helped sand down when he was 12. I remembered his little hands covered in dust, the way he grinned when we finished. The photo captions didn't say mother's house or inherited. They said property previously owned by a family friend who moved to assisted living. My name wasn't mentioned. I didn't exist. I printed the article at the library. 1 copy. Black and white. 2 days later, I sat across from Dr. Finch again. The consultation room was the same clock-ticking tissues, untouched pitcher of water still sweating quietly beside us. She scanned the paper I slid across the table. "They're monetizing it," I said. Dr. Finch nodded, once slow. "We already suspected he was planning resale. This confirms it's underway." Her fingers tapped a folder beside her elbow. "We have substantial evidence of documentation fraud, but we've waited to act. Your consent matters here, Mrs. Mercer. Pursuing this publicly means litigation, testimony, discovery." The word discovery landed sharp. Not mine, his. I looked down at the soft blue of my sleeve. My forearm still showed the faint yellow-green bloom of a healing bruise where the IV line had been. I didn't hesitate this time. "Do it." Dr. Finch exhaled slowly. Then she opened the folder. The recorder was in the side pocket of the duffel I hadn't unpacked since arriving at Haven Grace. It was wedged between a pair of socks and a folded grocery list I'd scribbled weeks ago. Small, black, older than most electronics you'd see in the shelter. Vaughn used to call it his memory keeper. He'd bring it to speech therapy appointments after the stroke, letting it capture his voice as it returned word by halting word. I hadn't touched it since he passed, but I kept it out of habit. Like his watch. Like the way I still made 2 cups of coffee some mornings. The battery light blinked orange when I powered it on. Most files were labeled by date static or silence or the sound of Vaughn clearing his throat. But one file stood out, 03199 Joel recorded 5 days before my surgery. I pressed play. We were in the kitchen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind our voices. Joel pacing me, sitting. "You're giving me your house and your kidney." His voice was lighter than I remembered. Warm, familiar. "Mom, I'll owe you everything." I didn't say much in the recording, just laughter, nervous, affectionate. The kind that tried to make light of sacrifice. I had said something like, "You're my son, Joel." "Of course I would." He responded, "Yeah, but still. The deed transfer's done. The surgery's coming. This is huge." I'll never forget it. I replayed that moment 3 times. Then I slid the recorder into the pocket of my coat and caught the next bus to the medical center. Dr. Finch's legal associate, a young woman named Priya, listened to the file without blinking. When it ended, she pressed stop, slid her laptop around, and clicked open a document titled Transaction Review, Joel Mercer. "We subpoenaed the broker handling the kidney transfer," she murmured, voice tight. "Guess how he labeled the payment?" I waited. "Consulting services. $500,000. 1 payment. Cleared through a Shell LLC registered in Delaware." I nodded. Once. As I reached for the recorder again, she stopped me. "We have enough," she said. "This will help seal it." Later that evening, Carmen handed me her phone again. Marla's real estate agency had updated their website. Her headshot was still polished, her bio crisp. But the line that used to read "partnered with Joel Mercer Property Consultant" was gone. I turned the recorder off for good that night, but its echo stayed with me. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and old air conditioning. Overhead, fans whispered through narrow vents, too quiet to cool anyone too present to ignore. I sat straight in the witness chair, palms folded in my lap. Across the room, Joel sat behind the defense table in a navy suit I'd never seen before. He looked tanned, like he'd just come back from somewhere with no consequences. The color didn't reach his eyes. Marla's chair was empty. The bailiff called for order, and the judge, Honorable Sandra Ruelas, nodded toward the prosecution. A young ADA named Colin Merck stood. Wire-rimmed glasses, steady voice. "Ms. Navarro," he began, "can you describe the events surrounding your decision to transfer your property to your son?" I met his eyes. He said it was to simplify the estate before the transplant, that it would save legal fees later. And did you have any reason not to trust that advice at the time he was my son? He nodded once. And what did he say to you after the surgery? He handed me a stack of discharge papers and told me the house was his now, that I needed to recover somewhere more appropriate. My voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. I had practiced this part. Merck stepped closer. Can you recall any direct remarks about your appearance or role in his life? I looked toward the jury. 12 strangers who didn't know me, who were trying to measure truth in posture and tone. He said I embarrassed him, that I was too frumpy to have guests over, that the neighbors thought I needed help with laundry. He and Marla were staging their lives to impress buyers. I didn't fit their brand. The silence that followed was a thick one, not disbelief, not pity, just reckoning. The judge leaned forward. Do you regret donating your kidney, Ms. Navarro? I took a breath. The memory of cold tile under my back in Joel's guest bathroom flashed through me, the shock, the hurt, the way he hadn't even met my eyes. Not for a second I answered. Just regret who it went through. Joel shifted. His fingers tightened around the edge of the defense table. The bailiff called for recess, and I walked down from the stand with my spine straight and my heart steady. The courthouse steps were slick from the morning drizzle streaks of gray stretching across the sky like someone had dragged a brush through wet paint. I stood under the awning, one hand gripping the steel railing, the other buried in the pocket of my coat. Joel emerged alone. No lawyer, no entourage. Just him in that too-perfect suit, eyes darting past reporters and clerks. He walked up close enough for me to smell the citrus cologne I'd once wrapped for him at Christmas. He stopped a foot away. His hand trembled slightly as he held out a folded sheet of paper. I didn't move. His throat worked before he spoke. I wrote you something. The words didn't sting. Not anymore. I glanced at the envelope and tilted my head. Is this more fine print? His face tightened just for a second, but he didn't answer. He let the paper hang in the air like a flag in windless silence. When I didn't reach for it, he slowly lowered his arm. No anger, no apology, just that hollow stillness. He walked down the steps, the envelope still in his hand. That night back behind the shelter, I lit a match. Carmen stood beside me, her coat zipped to the chin breadth, fogging into the dark. The coffee tin we used for compost now held something else. Joel's envelope, creased and untouched, rested in the center. I struck the match and touched it to the edge of the paper. The flame took its time curling the corner before spreading like frost in reverse. Orange licked across the surface, turning ink into smoke. Beside me, Carmen pulled out 2 chipped enamel mugs filled with broth and raised hers slightly. 2 endings that didn't kill us. I touched mine to hers. The tin glowed for a while longer before settling into ash and memory. In that warm, smoky hush behind the shelter, I didn't feel revenge, just release. And when I turned to go inside, I knew the fire had taken more than his paper. It had taken back part of my silence. The next morning, I would meet with Iris to discuss an apartment listing near the GED Center, my name only. The message came through Iris, printed neatly on hospital letterhead and tucked into my mailbox slot at Haven Grace. Patient recipient, row 427-3, would like to initiate contact. Name Miles Gutierrez. Age 27. No financial request attached. The paper felt too light to carry the weight it held. We met on a Sunday afternoon at a garden cafe near Silver Lake. The tables were small and round, scattered among pots of thyme and rosemary. Wind chimes clicked against one another like distant cutlery. Miles wore a pale green shirt and a baseball cap pulled low. His frame was still lean recovery weight, but his walk was steady. In his hand, he carried a small potted plant, barely the size of a teacup, a kalanchoe. Bright orange blooms peeking over thick green leaves, he held it out across the table. For you. Second chances should bloom somewhere. I hesitated, then accepted. My fingers brushed the clay rim. Only if it's alone. His smile was crooked but honest. Deal. He didn't ask why or how the kidney came to him. He didn't mention Joel or courtrooms or money. He told me he was a trades apprentice, had spent the last year learning how to install windows and tile backsplashes. He wanted to open his own shop someday, but for now he was focused on making it through 1 full month without a doctor's visit. We sat in the sun until it lowered behind the hedge. I listened more than I spoke. When he offered to let me stay in his aunt's guest casita rent-free, I shook my head. I'm not looking to be saved. He nodded like he understood. But we can still show up for each other. We began to meet weekly at the public library. Not always to talk. Sometimes we just sat near the windows with books in our laps reading in parallel. The Kalancho lived on the windowsill of my new apartment, modest 3rd floor, above a bakery that started prep at 4 in the morning. The yeast and coffee smells made it easier to wake up. And for the first time in months, I wanted to. The apartment above the violin repair shop smelled faintly of rosin and old varnish. Every time the downstairs door opened, the scent rose up through the floorboards like a memory. My new landlord, Mr. Halvorsen, told me the place hadn't been touched much since his aunt passed, but it was clean, sunlit, and quiet. A 1-bedroom with peeling paint around the windows and a view of Silver Lake that softened every afternoon into gold. In the far corner of the living room sat an upright piano, its wood scratched and keys uneven. A sticker on the fallboard read, Baldwin, 1968. The left pedal squeaked. I didn't mind. After dinner, I played simple scales with both hands, warming fingers, and memory at the same time. My dining table doubled as a classroom now. Tuesday through Thursday, 0 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. GED prep for 3 students referred by Haven Grace. The stipend was modest but consistent $200 per week, paid every Friday. Enough for groceries, transit utilities. Enough to not feel beholden. The recorder sat on the shelf near the window, wiped clean, reset to factory settings. I hadn't pressed record since the courthouse. It didn't feel necessary anymore. When the sentencing came through, 6 years plus restitution, I read it in the paper. Joel's name printed in plain font, right between a zoning appeal and a birth announcement. I folded the page in half and slipped it beneath the Kalancho pot. I did not go to the hearing. On Sunday morning, I took the long way to the cafe. The air was crisp spring, starting to soften the edges of winter. My old house stood just past the corner of Maple and Violet, its porch railing freshly painted. A new family lived there now, young, maybe early 30s. A boy kicked a soccer ball on the lawn. His father waved when our eyes met. I nodded, but didn't slow down. 2 blocks later, I reached the cafe. Miles was already seated at the outdoor table, 2 coffees steaming between him and an open chessboard. He glanced up, grinned, and moved a pawn forward. I sat down across from him, wrapped my hands around the cup, and let the breeze carry everything else away.